Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. ROS this year will be a little bit different, of course. We anticipate doing it in the spring, but then we moved it to November, and now it's going to be a hybrid meeting. As you know, we have quite some problems with COVID, also in Belgium here, so not a lot of travel restrictions, not allowing us to have a lot of faculty on site. But we do have some Belgian speakers that will present from this podium. All the other persons will join us online. First talk that I planned almost 1.5 years ago probably is, how did robotic abdominal wall surgery influence my practice? Yes, so this is the disclosure slide. This is a CME accredited event, so every speaker should disclose their slides or their conflict of interest. I do quite some research with meshes and also Proctor for Intuitive, so I'm a little bit biased towards the robot. I changed the title a little bit because of all these COVID restrictions, and that actually we're 4 years now in my surgical practice. To be in line a little bit with the trends on social media, you can say how it started and how is it going. It started actually for me in 2016, visiting the American Hernia Society and meeting up with Conrad Balliser, talking about and seeing that many surgeons in the US had adopted the robotic platform for use of abdominal wall surgery. This inspired me, and since I worked in a hospital where we had a robot, and after an invitation of Conrad to join all these terrific surgeons from the US that already were on robotic abdominal wall surgery, this inspired me. Like, okay, this is something that looks interesting, we have to explore it, and we've set up what is called the Robust Hernia Project, and here you see a print screen of my Facebook actually bringing the robot to Europe, as I said. So this is my case evolution over the 3 years. Of course, you could add another year to it now, but basically the chart has stayed the same. You see mainly groin hernias, because as abdominal wall surgery, this is what we are doing as the highest caseload, and then you have primary, incisional, and the more complicated peristomals. So how did it influence my practice? If you see, this is the axis type comparing open surgery, conventional laparoscopy, and robot-assisted laparoscopy. You see a large decrease and a significant decrease of the number of open surgeries. So if you are a believer in minimal invasive surgery, you could say, okay, adoption of this robotic platform has enhanced me in doing more cases minimal invasive. So when I started the project, I like science a lot, and really the question, of course, is how does this robotic introduction in hernia surgery benefit our patients? You always get 3 questions. It takes too long, it's too expensive, and is there a clinical benefit? There's not really time to go into detail with all these questions, but for the groin, I think this is the status where I am at the moment. It takes too long, no. Too expensive, yes, probably. Is there a clinical benefit? For the uncomplicated groin hernias, I would say no. We've published on this first question, the timing, looking at the skin-to-skin operating time as a surrogate for the learning curve, and actually what we saw is that even after 25 cases, more or less, the time skin-to-skin, so this includes the docking time for laparoscopic TAPP compared to robotic-assisted TAPP, was similar. This was not what we expected, but that was a finding. So we now have accepted since last week a study looking at the cost of robotic groin hernia repair, and as you see, conventional laparoscopy 270 cases compared them with 440 for robot-assisted cases. And this is more or less the summary of that article, where you see that there is a significant higher cost related to robotic groin hernia repair, which is in our hospital, in our setting, more or less 600 euros, which is mainly related to the material that you use to do the surgery. When you look at my track record of the groin hernias, you see that after this year I've done less and less groin. That's because of access. We have a second robot now in another hospital where we're working together with, and I did the first cases last week, so probably the number of groin hernias, like you see, might increase as long as I'm allowed to do them robot-assisted. So what you do also see in this slide is the number of cases that I do open for groin hernia repair has decreased. Why is that? That's because, in line with this paper published by Kutsi, that I do more cases complex groin hernias. What's that? After prostatectomy, large inguinal-scrotal hernias, recurrences after previous mesh, we now take on with the robotic platform. So if you're a believer in minimal invasive surgery, this might be a subpopulation of groin hernias where you do find a benefit for the adoption of robotic platform. So this is actually the groin hernia cases we extracted from the last years. You see that the open surgery disappeared in favor of minimal invasive surgery. Looking at the ventral hernias, primary ventral hernias, so umbilical hernias, epigastric hernias, you also see decline. So I used more and more minimal invasive surgery. Same for the incisionals. Also there, significant reduction of the number of open surgeries by using the robotic platform. My algorithm at the moment, more or less, is if I have a hernia which is in M2, M3, M4, I would go for a retromuscular repair in the majority of cases. If it's more lateral, caudal or cranial isolated hernias, I take them on preperitoneal. Intraperitoneal has almost disappeared from my practice, like you see in this slide. This is overall, this is not only robotic cases, this is also open laparoscopic cases. You see a large increase of the retromuscular approach. Approach. We've published a technique that was described previously by laparoscopic conventional technique using the robotic platform in this paper, and actually this will be included as chapter 12 of the new book that is coming out on robotic general surgery, so becoming one of the choices that you can make to treat ventral hernias robot-assisted. So for this, I would say it takes too long, no. After learning curve again, too expensive, no. Certainly if you compare it to IPOM repair, no need for tackers or expensive mesh. And the clinical benefit for me is quite obvious with increased pain, and most of these patients can be treated ambulatory. The larger, the Robotar, this is Conrad. He came to proctor me. This is me after my first 2 robotic TARs. Don't plan 2 in a day when you start, because in the beginning it takes time. There is a learning curve as well, and once again I think it lies around 20-25 cases to become quite proficient in this complex operation of posterior component separation. But seeing these patients afterwards really gives you the benefit for the patient and the investment that you do in taking this training program, investing your time to learn how to do this technique minimal invasive. For example, this is a patient that is going home the second postoperative day after a bilateral TAR, including a parostomal hernia, the so-called Poli technique, with a mesh of about 40 by 30 centimeters. This is the moments when I started realizing, okay, this is going to come. That's where, for patients, really lies the benefit, taking them from open, large surgeries to minimal invasive with the robotic platform. So coming back to the grid, it takes too long, a TAR. Also after learning curve, it's too expensive, no. It's too expensive, no. Is there a clinical benefit? Yes, for sure. If you can do this patient's minimal invasive and avoid a large open operation, that is giving a significant reduction of the hospital stay. Another thing that's changed is that I've become more than a surgeon, I've also become a proctor. This was the first robotar that we did. Conrad was there, we had a dinner at home. And then I started proctoring. The first one was in Denmark with Dr. Greene, and then you see Scandinavia was coming, also Belgium, of course. You see many countries there. It's like an axis, more or less. The last new center I proctored was in Ireland, and there were several scheduled in the UK before the COVID pandemic took that away. So a lot of my time, that's one of the changes in practices. I've become a part-time proctor. Also in Belgium, we have a lot of robots in Belgium, a lot of interest, also many high-quality abdominal wall surgeons. So at this moment, I think there's about 12 centers that have adopted to some degree abdominal wall surgery with the robotic platform. So I would say enjoy the meeting. I hope all goes well. It's a bit strange to give these talks without an audience. The next session will be non-CME session because we have mainly speakers from industry and looking forward to that. I would like to also introduce Archana Ramaswamy from Minneapolis and Conrad Ballister, who will moderate with me online. And I see all the speakers, most of the speakers are there. Conrad is a surgeon from Phoenix. Archana is a surgeon from Minneapolis. And they were my proctors on groin hernia and ventral hernia in the start of about 4 years ago now. So, Conrad, how you doing? The middle of the night, coffee.
How you doing, sir? Yes, it's been a crazy time. It certainly has been a crazy year. But one thing, it's super exciting to see that the education never stops. And certainly, I love going to Belgium. We've been there many times. You've put on and organized amazing educational events, and I'm continue to be excited to be here, whether virtual or live.
Archana, you want to say some welcome words as well?
Yes, so it's exciting to see everybody, even if it's only virtually. And I feel a little bit like when I'm usually in Belgium because I haven't slept all night operating, so I feel a little jet lagged right now. So that's putting me in the mood to learn from everybody. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Andrew Beaux, who is speaking to us from Edinburgh, Scotland. He is an established leader in abdominal wall reconstruction, in addition to his other interests of bariatric and elective and emergency general surgery. He's going to be speaking to us today about the Versius robot from CMR Surgical, which is approved and available across Europe and is working towards FDA approval in the United States. Dr. Beaux.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Philip, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this conference. So sorry we can't be together. And I'd also like to thank CMR Surgical for allowing me to present this lecture too. And what we're going to do is talk today about a robot that's relatively new to the market. Many of you may have heard about it already. but I wish to give you a little bit of background to it. These are my disclosures. Most of these are of no real relevance. They obviously demonstrate a hernia interest, but I have been trained as a CMR surgical proctor, and that's of relevance to this talk. CMR Surgical, it's a company which hasn't been around very long. It incorporated in 2014. Obviously, there was work going on in the background before that. Within a few years, they had a viable robot-assisted platform available. They changed their name for a variety of reasons, from Cambridge Medical Robotics to CMR Surgical, partly to fit in with their credo and influence. The robot platform was approved in 2019, and in 2019, the first operation on patients were undertaken. It's interesting chatting to the company about their origins. They started a bit like Tesla cars with a blank sheet. They didn't make it robots. They didn't make laparoscopic stacks. So they had a blank piece of paper, and they thought, how can we make a robot-assisted platform? And they got inspiration, I guess, from the human body. And this was one of the earlier working prototypes of their concept. And in a sense, they have produced a human arm with a shoulder, an elbow, and a wrist in a modular fashion. Where have they got to now? There's obviously the greater signs, because every time you give someone data, it'll change within days. But they've done almost 1,000 procedures across these specialties. There's been a lot of trial work gone on beforehand, and there's at least 8 commercial installations globally, one of which we have in Edinburgh. Not in my hospital, but in the sister hospital. But I hope to have access to it soon. And these numbers are relatively small. You can say they've been in the market now for 18 months, and the uptake is small. But this has hit us, and it's hit my training, it's hit my development of using this platform, and it's made it very difficult to teach and instruct across the world. And we're all struggling with this, as we are with conferences. So what is the Versia system? Well, it's a modular robotic platform. Modular because it's in each one of these base units can either drive the camera or drive an instrument. So you could have a camera and one instrument, or 2 instruments, or 3 instruments. And to a certain extent, you could keep going with as many ports and instruments as you wanted, but you can only use 2 at once. And obviously these have a size, and they will, if you have too many, they will soon start bashing and clashing. Hardwired, not Wi-Fi, but hardwired to the console. And I'll talk a little bit about the console too. And obviously auxiliary screens for everyone else to see what's going on. Console 2, and obviously auxiliary screens for everyone else to see what's going on. These are in 2D, and this is a 3D platform. The base units, you can move them wherever you want, as long as when you're doing the operation, they both reach the patient and don't interfere with the action of each other. This sort of setup would be more like a TAPP, so 1 port on one side, 1 instrument on one side, 1 instrument on the other side, the camera, whichever side that it works, of the patient. Whereas this perhaps would be more set up for more IPOM, 3, the camera, and 2 working ports on the same side, in that configuration. The color coding is important so that you know at a glance which instrument is attached to which arm, and you can see that when I show you close-up pictures of the console, that the color coding also works through the console. These instruments are interchangeable. They have multiple uses which are recorded, and you can you're aware as you start a case the life left before servicing of all the components. Instrumentation, well, it's a relatively new company, so instruments are still a little limited. I think what's interesting to note is these are all 5mm instruments, and these go down a standard 5mm port. They have done work with allied medical ports, and therefore those are the recommended ports to use. We actually use them as standard in a hospital. They're amongst the cheapest disposable laparoscopic ports on the market, and they work well. Scissors, a needle driver, and a variety of graspers, and the energy vice just now is the diathermy hook. 5mm instruments. There are some challenges related to that. Obviously, everything's been miniaturized, are a lot smaller, and therefore being able to use that makes it more difficult. And I think sometimes the degree of the ability to grasp may not be quite so good as a larger instrument, but that will improve. The console, one of the key interesting parts of this robotic console is that it's open console. Gives you some awareness of peripheral vision, able to see what's going on round about you. And the other key interesting thing is that you can stand up to work. And that's my preferred use of the console. Standing straight, moving the arms up and down to the comfortable place, moving the screen up and down to the appropriate place. And there's a lot to be said for working standing up. And I enjoy that position. The hand controllers, you'll see them in functioning soon, but essentially they look like Xbox controllers that have been cut in half, one for the right hand, one for the left hand. A clutch button. This is the current button for activating diathermy. The index finger sits in here, which allows you to then open and close the instrument, and then the movement of these will mimic the movement at the instrument end. So here it is in action. This is in our sister hospital. This is my colleague doing a right hemicolectomy, and I'll show you a brief video soon. We're set up for a disaster and rapid conversion in the early days. Right hemicolectomy, we do have the camera, 2 working ports, and you'll see that the assistant also has a port which they can interfere with. The 3D screen on the console, Doug is sitting down, and obviously a 2D image for everyone else in the theatre. I talked to you about having an additional port if need be. It's not always necessary, but here the assistant is able to manipulate tissue independent of the surgeon stroke robot, and sometimes have an advantage too for passing in things like needles, mesh, or whatever. So here's the operation. It's a short video, but just get a feel of the system working. You can see that the arms are moving. You do have to set these up so they don't bump into each other. There's a lot of technology which allows you to move the arms even when you're working, and you can see the hand position in the controllers. This is, for me, a little bit not quite right ergonomically because the finger is straight. I'd prefer a slightly curved finger for position of rest, but it's movement of the wrist, it's movement in and out, it's movement down and up, which translates to the movement in the robot. And you can see it's relatively small movements, it's comfortable movements, and it's done a lot with fingers, wrist. This image is slightly funny because obviously it's a recording of a 3D image, and we're looking at it as 2D because we don't have the cameras on. And there's the surgical ports, which are off the press, are relatively inexpensive. And you can see once it's set up and going, conversations can start, and the surgeon can mind his own business and really enjoy getting into the zone, but aware of what's going on round about. What's great about Versius? Well, I came to this platform with very little robotic surgical experience. I have reasonable laparoscopic experience. I've got quite a few grey hairs and been doing laparoscopic surgery for many years. And this is me actually in my early training. And with the setup, we were going to do a TARP, popularized by our host, Philippe Maisons. And these are just some shots taken of me doing it. I found it was relatively easy to mobilize the flap, cross, start to repair the defect, and indeed sew up this tissue at the end. And this was me probably on my second day of training, and I was able to achieve that. This port was there for another reason, so that's nothing to do with the surgery. The color coding I talked about, the orange arm at this point has a needle driver, and the turquoise arm also has a needle driver on it, but you can at a glance know when you look up which one is which. You can swap hands, and you can, just because they're set up with the right and left, you can swap hands, so this instrument can become this handed one and vice versa. So that takes a little bit of getting used to, just because you think of the setup in terms of the port positions, but there's a lot of dexterity in there. What's great about it? Well, it is modular. You can have 1, 2, 3 working ports. It is very lap-like. In other words, you generally put in your ports as if you were doing a laparoscopic operation. There is some variations. I think a TEP surgery would be difficult because the instruments are quite close together and you will get a lot of arm clashing. But for a laparoscopic fundoplication, laparoscopic cholecystectomy, IPOMs, TARPs, you put these ports in very similar to laparoscopic operation. It is open cockpit. You can look around. I enjoy standing. And obviously, like any robot platform, you have 3D, you have a magnified view. The surgeon is very much control, particularly of the camera. And the interesting thing, obviously, with any robotic platform is telemetry. You can get experts to undertake an operation, and you can almost hands-on follow, and you can get feedback as to how close you were, past pointing, errors, that kind of thing. What needs some work? Well, I said this company started in 2014, and it lags behind in terms of years of development of some of its competitors. So the instrumentation, there are some downsides to them. They don't always grasp so well. They don't always cut so well, but they'll get better, and there'll be more of them. They need an energy device, and I'm sure that'll be something that happens. The camera, you have options, 30 up or 30 down. What you lose just now is the ability, which you have in laparoscopic surgery, to twist a 30-degree camera to look up and look down almost at the same time, or look sideways, depending on how you see best. Ergonomics, there's just one handpiece for all size of hands, and I find that with bigger hands that getting to the diathermy button is a little bit difficult for me. And I've talked about the straight index finger, which after a period of time with my arthritis starts to get a little bit sore. I prefer that it would be in more of a position of rest. And the other slight design fault, but I'm sure that there will be changes and improvements to this, is what's called the 5 centimeter rule. And let me just briefly explain that. When the instrument comes into the port and you port train it, so the robot learns where it is in space, once port training is complete, the instrument won't be able to work until it's advanced a further 5 centimeters. Now, you obviously have the port as just in as possible, and that's the benefits of applied medical, because they have a little balloon here, so you can pull the port back, but it doesn't fall out. You do your port training, but you still have to advance it 5 centimeters. That means you can't work within 5 centimeters of the entry point of the port. So that sometimes makes you think where your port's going to be, and you might have to move them slightly further away from where you're going to be operating than you would traditionally. But as I say, it is very intuitive in terms of how it works. And while I have very little Xbox or robot experience, I was very quickly able to do things, certainly within the confines of the cadaveric lab. I spoke about COVID. We have a major issue with the ability to train, and this was something I did a few weeks ago, which was distant proctoring to a center in Europe as I sat in my office in exactly the same position that I'm talking to you now. And with this teleproctoring, I had a view of the surgeon. I had an overview of what was going on in surgery. I had a view of what was going on through the camera, what was being done. I could annotate the screen. Here's a green line here. And I could speak to the surgeon both verbally and through a chat. And I could speak to the surgeon open or in private. And this is clearly a way of the future that we can do this. And this is just one such company that CMR have been using for distance proctoring. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a very brief run through of the CMR Surgical Versius robot. I would have liked to have shown you more operative videos of hernias being repaired, but sadly, my training has been somewhat curtailed. And I think, as it's largely cadaveric, you'll have seen them, and I'm not particularly competent that it would be wrong to show them. But been absolutely privileged to talk about this robot. I think this is a British company which is going places. It certainly believes that it has a future. In 2018, it raised a large sum of money. At that time, it was the largest fundraising event of any medical company. So clearly other people believe in them. And I think this modular concept, something you can not quite put in the back of your car, but put in a small van and drive around the place wherever it needs to go, has a lot of attractions. There is some work, the ergonomics, the instrumentation, the energy sources, but like all new startup, that will come with time as it develops. Sorry that we aren't all together, but a huge invite. Hopefully this horrible pandemic will be over by next year. And Edinburgh in September is a pretty cool month, and love to see you all for this conference. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Professor DeBeaux. I'm super excited that not only new technology is emerging, but we're putting new technology into the hands of the key opinion leaders and master surgeons. This session is particularly exciting to me. As many of you know, I've had the awesome opportunity of traveling globally, talking about robotic surgery, and competition will drive down the costs of these systems that will make these technology more available on a larger scale. So I'm going to introduce Arun Mohan. He's the global head of product marketing and product management of Transenterics from Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you very much, Arun, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for giving me this time to present. My name is Arun Mohan. I'm the global head of product marketing at Transenterics, and I do appreciate a few minutes of your time to talk about our vision of digitizing surgery with the Senhance surgical system. And so before we jump into the system, wanted to be able to give you a little bit of context about our company. Transenterics is a global company. It's a small company, but a global company nonetheless. And we are headquartered in North Carolina in the U.S. And that being said, we do have offices all throughout the globe, in Europe and Switzerland, as well as a large customer experience center in Milan, Italy. And then to really cater to our Asia Pacific markets, we have offices in Tokyo and Taipei. And if you look at our engineering talent, we have quite the diverse engineering talent that spans across the globe. Several of our engineers are in our North Carolina headquarters, but we have several of our robotics engineers also in Milan, Italy. And the bulk of our augmented intelligence or AI engineering talent is in Israel. And so you can see here, small company, but quite a large global footprint. And in the few years we've been on the market, we've seen over 3,400 cases with our Senhance system, which has been very encouraging to see the kind of adoption and the use of our system. And we really are. We're the first surgical robotics platform to come on the market in abdominal surgery in over 20 years. And to have FDA clearance and CE mark clearance for Europe, and then also the approval in Japan, is something that we are very proud of as a company. And you can see here there's a few accolades of innovation, and we continue to strive to push that innovation throughout with our company and with our products. So with that in mind, then, we really hold true and hold focused on this on this statement here. It's a little bit wordy, but it's very meaningful to us. And especially the part where we say we believe in digitizing the interface between the surgeon and the patient. By digitizing the interface first, we can then do some incredible innovations after that. We can help not only in physical control of the instruments, so improving that, but also in things like AI and augmented intelligence. But it all starts with digitizing the interface between the surgeon and the patient. And as we go through this presentation, I hope that I'll be able to show you what we mean by that and how we're doing that with Senhance. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this slide. It's got a lot of information, but bear with me. I'm going to take you through it step by step. On the left side of the screen are a few of the innovation firsts that we have brought to surgery for the first time ever, and we're very proud of that. And we know that there's a long way to go, but these are certainly some highlights that we have brought to the table as new innovations. But let's start with the system on the right side. This is our Senhance surgical system, and when we sought out to build the system, we were not looking to build a me-too robotic surgery device or system. We were looking to really understand why laparoscopic surgeons have been resistant to adopting robotics and understand that need and those challenges and then solve for those needs. And the output, the outcome is the design of the system as you see it today. So the first need that laparoscopic surgeons highlighted to us was this sense of openness. It needs to be open. So then we said, okay, that's helpful. What do you mean by open? And they said, well, the first thing is it needs to be easily integratable into the operating room. Today, an operating room has to change and has to be, again, refitted with new technologies to accept a robotic system. They said that's not acceptable. The robotic system needs to come in and be integrated and be open in the kind of architecture to fit into the operating room. So that's the way we designed it. The Senhance system is completely integratable into the OR, the existing OR today with OR vision systems, the OR bed, the trocars, et cetera. And I'll show you more as we talk about the system. The other aspect of being open, they said, was open in communication. So they wanted a console that the surgeon was not buried in the console, but had an open sense of feel, open communication with the bedside, so they could have this free communication throughout surgery. And that was important to them. So that's the way we also designed the Senhance system. You can see here with the surgeon sitting upright, head up, being able to freely communicate with the bedside team. And the third one then was open around the patient. This was very important. They said they were resistant to robotic technologies because it crowded the patient, made it difficult for them to access the patient. And so as a result, the design of our system are these boom-like arms you can see here, high up and over the patient, to be able to create as much room and easy access to the patient during surgery. So that was a big need, and we felt like we have addressed that need quite well. The next thing they said was laparoscopy. They've spent their entire careers honing and developing the skill of laparoscopy, and they're very good at what they do, and they do excellent surgery. And so their request was, we want to build off of laparoscopy and not off the skills of laparoscopy and not replace it. So you can see here that our system with the laparoscopic pistol grip handles, as well as laparoscopic motion are all meant to be in line with laparoscopic technique, so that these surgeons can continue to build off of laparoscopy and not have to relearn something else from scratch. The next thing they said was visualization and camera control was very important to them. They wanted to be able to have clear, stable visualization, and so we were able to provide the 3D HD visualization for them to see things clearly and in a stable way. And the other thing was they said they wanted to control the camera. And so for the first time in surgery, we brought to bear eye tracking camera control. And this is a technology that's able to sense the surgeon's eyes, track their eyes so that they can simultaneously move the camera while they're moving their instruments. And this capability, this ability was well received, has been very well received by our surgeons, and we're quite proud of it. We continue to improve the technology as we move forward. And then after that, they said cost. They said, listen, cost has been something that has prevented robotic surgery from really taking effect because it simply adds too much cost to the per procedure cost today. And so our task then was to say, okay, how can we meaningfully address it? So the first way we did this was, as you can see here, this digital fulcrum. Now, why is that important? That's important not just for the patient benefit, because the system is able to sense the trocar, the forces at the fascial level, and minimize any sort of traumatic forces at the trocar as the system and as the instrument is in use. But that was one aspect. The other aspect is because the system can find this remote center at the fascial level and create a digital fulcrum. Now what that means is a surgeon and hospital can use any trocar that they want to. They don't have to buy a robotic trocar and utilize it. They can go, and so that really helps with controlling costs and controlling existing supply that is there in the operating room today. The next big impactful capability was this reusable instruments. And by making all of our instruments, all of our standard instruments completely reusable, we're able to drive down that cost per procedure down to levels that are similar to laparoscopy. And so we felt that, on this slide, there's so many more other features and benefits, but I wanted to talk about capabilities and how we addressed meaningfully the challenges and needs of laparoscopic surgeons. And these are the factors on the slide that say that. On the left side, in our journey to create that bridge, that right bridge for laparoscopy, we also then have, made advances when it comes to augmented intelligence, being the first system to provide AI in surgery, and I'll explain a little bit more. We're able to utilize the kind of instruments we have. We were able to go smaller to 3 millimeter instruments, and now have made an entrant into the pediatric surgery space in a very meaningful way. We're also the first robotic system to provide haptic sensing. This was one thing that was a pretty incredible innovation for us, because laparoscopic surgeons said, listen, if I'm going to leave the bedside and come to the console, one big compromise that I have to make today with robotics is I lose haptics, and that's not acceptable. I want to be able to feel suture and feel tissue, and that's what I'm used to doing to do the best surgery. And so we took that to heart and spent a lot of time to develop a system that has haptic sensing, where a surgeon can feel what they're doing during surgery, and that certainly distinguishes us from other robotic surgical offerings on the market today. And then finally, you can see here that some of the other accolades, we are quite broadly indicated for a variety of procedures across all different specialties. So that's a lot on this slide, a lot of information. And this next slide here just essentially summarizes it together in 4 big buckets. And we talk about, when we look at familiar laparoscopic technique and the ease of use in patient setup and docking, that's all with OR efficiency in mind. We were very serious because of what our laparoscopic surgeons told us on maintaining good MIS standards, making sure all instruments were 5 millimeters or smaller, and coming to market with the first 3 millimeter instruments in robotic surgery. Haptic sensing was very important to maintain MIS standards. And then, of course, being able to actually control that incisional site trauma was another important factor. And you can see all of these keeping in mind the economics or the financial impact with reusable instruments and being able to integrate into the OR. I'm going to talk a little bit more now for the rest of the presentation on these aspects of the digital benefits. We talked a little bit earlier about by digitizing the interface, we're now able to provide all of these interesting benefits, not just in instrument precision, but also in AI. And you'll see as we go through what we mean at Transenterix by augmented intelligence. So before moving any further with AI, let's just confront the elephant in the room, and that's cost. And in our experience, when we were talking to hospital CEOs as well as surgeons, they had 3 main concerns when it came to costs. The first one is procedure costs. And really that was driven by robotics today have limited life instruments that add significant additional cost per procedure. And they said that was unacceptable. So the way that Senhance addresses this is through reusable instruments. And because we're able to do that, we're able to drive down the costs significantly and start to get closer to those per procedure costs you see in laparoscopy. The next big bucket was capital costs. And with a lot of you, I think all of you are very familiar that investing in a robotic system is not just buying the robotic system. There's a lot of other things that after that you realize needs to be added to that robotic system. And with traditional robotics today, there are specific vision systems that need to be bought, robotic trocars, very specific sterilization equipment that needs to be bought for the hospital to cater to these new robotic instruments, and then also things like a robotic focused OR bed that allows for better robotic surgery. All of those things are not an issue with Senhance. When we designed the system, we said let's integrate it into the existing OR infrastructure, that there's no need for new vision systems. You can use existing vision systems, existing trocars, the same sterilization equipment, and also the same OR beds that are in your operating rooms today. So no additional capital investment. That was all to keep in line with being responsible with costs. And the third big bucket was upgrades. Technology is continuously evolving. We understand that. And it's expensive to keep up with technology. And I think a fear of a lot of hospitals and surgeons is this is a significant investment into robotic technology. What if I make that investment and suddenly there's a new version out? What does that do to all my investment there and my money that I just spent on this new system? And so while today in the market that a new sort of version of a robotic system comes every 4 years, we wanted to break that expectation and say, let's just make it modular. Only upgrade the things that need to be upgraded. Don't upgrade everything. But it needs to be built with a modular design in mind. And that's the way we built Senhance. And so if there are instrument upgrades that need to happen, it can only happen with the instruments. The entire system does not need to be changed. If the arm needs to be upgraded for any reason, it's only the arm, not the console, not the instruments. And same thing with the console. If it's the console that needs to be upgraded, it is only that piece that gets upgraded and nothing else. So this is what we call a modular design, and it allows us to control the costs of upgrade and be responsible financially with our system. The next question in your mind is how are we doing clinically? I showed you a number of how we're doing in the last couple of years, but this slide is meant to really dive a little bit deeper. And if you look on the left side, 2017 and 2018 were years when we were just getting into the market. 2017 in Europe, 2018 in the US, just getting new programs started because that's when we first got clearances from different regulatory agencies. But I'd say 2019 was really our first year of performance. And you can see here that the programs that were in Europe and the programs in the US were just getting over their learning curve. And you can see here the significant increase in adoption and utilization of Senhance at those programs. Quite impressive. 2019, we were all excited to see this trend continue in 2020. And then COVID has significantly impacted some of those expectations. But even in the face of COVID, we're still on track to meeting the same case utilization numbers as 2019, and we're quite excited by that progress. Kind of shows that the robustness of Senhance even in the face of a pandemic, a global pandemic. On the right side, be able to speak to the use of the system across different specialties. And you can see here it has a good response and good applicability across multiple different specialties in surgery today. And we're quite happy with that mix. We continue to see a pretty healthy mix like this moving forward. Now, coming to the system itself, we talked about an open platform architecture, and I wanted to just talk a little bit more about that. We believe that we need to be able to always refine and provide good instruments and good technologies to do good surgery. So 3mm surgery was a critical part to provide that for the first time in surgery, in robotic surgery. And so we brought that to market last year, and we can see its use in pediatrics today and being very impactful for that surgical specialty. You'll see here with the ultrasonic to be able to provide advanced energy. Advanced energy is a key part of doing good surgery today, and our ultrasonic device allows us to provide the provision of advanced energy in surgery. And then finally with articulation. And I think you'll see here that articulation is needed, but we didn't want to develop articulation for the sake of articulation. We wanted to be very thoughtful and planful. And so we launched for the first time our 5mm line of articulated devices in Europe last year. It's doing very well, and we expect to continue to provide it to markets in the US and in APAC very soon. So with that in mind, with an open architecture and open interface, you can see here that our adapters allow us to perfectly adopt, whether it's standard instruments or different vision systems, powered adapters for articulation, adapters for advanced energy. And this is how we democratize the landscape and allow us to use different sort of instruments on our system. You'll see here that all of the major vision systems are compatible, right from Storrs to Richard Wolf. And so depending on what you have in your hospital, it can be integrated in. Also, when it comes to advanced energy, from Irby to ConMed, everything is compatible with the system, really to be able to showcase that this is an open platform sort of architecture for robotic surgery. But one of the things is that robots today do not see, and because they cannot see, they cannot analyze anything, and they cannot actually assist. And so this is our landscape that we talk through. The first step in digitizing the interface is to be able to provide robotic manipulation. Next step is make it open so it can talk to other technologies. And then after this is allow the system to be able to see, and then it's able to learn and meaningfully deliver assistance in surgery. Then that's AI. So we sought out to do that. Our Intelligent Surgical Unit, our ISU today, that was cleared by the FDA and is in use in the US market this year, allows the system to now actually process what it's seeing in the visual field. And once it processes it, it can learn it, and then it can assist. And these are the foundational elements for augmented intelligence. And we believe that it's the right way to build the system to AI capabilities. But I think one of the questions you might ask is, well, what does that mean to TransEnterix? Well, AI and augmented intelligence can start with very simple but impactful camera control features. The first one here is when you allow the system to be able to process what it's seeing, we can provide features and tools and capabilities like this, where we have 3D point-to-point measurement. Really valuable, and I think all of you in the audience would say this is going to be highly valuable in helping standardize surgery, especially in mesh fixation, mesh sizing, looking at different margins to be able to get adequate amount of tissue. The other thing then is in anatomical structure identification. So if you can if the system can learn certain structures and certain surfaces, then you can create no-fly zones, you can create tagging of tissue during surgery to help avoid any kind of surgical errors that could happen during surgery. And then finally, things like automating certain tasks. So the system here recognizes that there's a needle driver in the right hand, grasper in the left, and when you throw that stitch, it'll automatically zoom the camera in, and when you pull that stitch out, or that needle out, it will zoom the camera out. Just making these regular tasks a little bit more efficient, seamless, helping you to be a lot more comfortable and less stressed when doing a lot of your surgical tasks in surgery today. So this is what we mean when we talk about AI. And I'll say that just to end on it, giving the ability of the system to actually see and process an image in surgery is invaluable, because not only can you do the things that we are talking about and developing, but now you're able to provide information in real time during surgery to help with decision support. So you're able to create no-fly zones, you're able to do overlaps and overlays in surgery to help avoid critical structures. And these are all really exciting new developments that we're excited to work on and really be on the forefront of innovation in delivering. And so with that, I hope that gives you an insight into what we mean and why we're excited when we say digitizing the interface between the surgeon and the patient really has all of these great benefits. Because if we can digitize that interface, then we can do so many wonderful things, not just in instrument control, but then also in decision support and in augmented intelligence. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to any of the questions that you might have for me.
Okay, thank you for that. We have one more speaker. Actually, this is one that I invited when I visited Yuri Novitsky's meeting in very early this year, which was the last meeting I attended, the last time I've been flying. So it's Vicarious. It's a company from Boston in the US. I had a little preview of their video, so I'm looking forward to that, to the presentation of their technology.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you to Dr. Meisels and the Robotic Abdominal Wall Surgery Symposium for inviting me to share this incredible new platform with you. I'm Barry Greene, the co-founder and chief medical officer at Vicarious Surgical. And today I'll be talking about using our own technology to shrink surgeons down and beam them inside of their patients. Before we start, I would like to introduce you to our amazing team. We couldn't do this without them. Vicarious Surgical is based in Boston and interested in your robotic needs and opinions, so please reach out to me. Surgical techniques have developed over the last century and a half when exceptional hand-eye coordination, a delicate touch, excellent dexterity, and natural three-dimensional vision were seamlessly controlled by a single mind. The cost was a very large, painful incision and complications arising from that trauma. The laparoscopic, minimally invasive revolution markedly decreased patient injury and enhanced both patient recovery and satisfaction simply by using several small incisions. Yet the dexterity and hand-eye coordination and ability to move around the abdomen were seriously compromised and limited by a narrow, two-dimensional view, not directly controlled by the surgeon. Yes, laparoscopic surgery has much less injury to the patient, but it is also less capable for the surgeon. Please don't get me wrong. I love minimally invasive surgery. I'm a minimally invasive bariatric and robotic surgeon with an active surgical practice. I began performing laparoscopic hernias in 1992, and I hand-sew all my gastrojejunectomies. Years ago, I recognized while teaching suturing that the abdominal wall was the nemesis of the minimally invasive surgeon, creating the fulcrum effect, making hand-eye coordination at times difficult. Current robots do significantly improve on straight-stick laparoscopic surgery. However, the ability to look around corners and go where you want in the abdomen when you want is significantly limited. So what does surgery look like today? Well, the answer is that it's mostly open surgery. There are about 100 million abdominal procedures performed across the world yearly, and nearly 3/4 of them are performed open, even in Europe and in the United States, where robots are everywhere. Almost half of the surgeries are performed open. And it's not because we don't want to perform minimally invasive surgery. It's because the resources available and the training leave open surgery as the most capable way to operate today. Even in most robotic-equipped hospitals, operating with a robot in the evening or on weekends is forbidden. Moving away from open surgery and towards minimally invasive surgery is incredibly important because we all see that open surgery has long recovery with significant pain and wound complications, while well-performed minimally invasive surgery results in a more rapid recovery. Open hernia surgery has significant recurrence rates, while well-performed minimally invasive surgery has lower hernia rates and less hernia recurrences. Ultimately, the right minimally invasive surgical platform will have a lower overall utilization of healthcare resources. It will be better for society. We need to offer surgeons a solution that is both minimally invasive and more capable, one that gives the surgeon access to the entire abdomen, which brings us to what we are doing at Vicarious Surgical. The Vicarious system starts with a single incision in the abdominal wall. Through this incision, we insert 2 arms and a camera that can pan and tilt, giving the surgeon complete control and access through this one incision. Today's single incision surgical robots that are available now require incision sizes of 25 to 35 millimeters. Our device today is 18 millimeters, and we are quickly moving to a 15 millimeter incision. Currently available single incision surgical robots are also incredibly limited with what the surgeon can do because of their low force and low range of motion, which is why our device is unrestricted. It's versatile and free from the incision site. This is really the first of its kind. It has the ability to face in any direction and operate anywhere in the abdomen from any incision, which frees the surgeon completely from the incision and allowing the surgeon to quickly adapt if the operative anatomy is different than expected. The surgeon can therefore place the incision where they want and where the patient wants. Can you imagine doing a right retrorectus dissection from the left side and then turning around and doing the opposite retrorectus dissection from the opposite side of the abdomen? Then looking up and closing the anterior fascia, placing your mesh and closing the posterior fascia, all from one incision. It's really amazing to me. And this entire system is very efficient with one incision to make and just one robot to insert. The result is decreased time from the incision to actually starting the surgery. The system is portable between operating rooms, creating a total solution that is cost-effective both in capital expenditure and procedural costs, allowing for expansion of robotic surgery into ambulatory surgery centers and small facilities, as well as increasing the capacity for robotic surgery at larger centers. And this next point is very important to me. The setup of this robot is very simple. This means that if you want to add on an incarcerated ventral hernia to the end of your surgical day, you'd be able to. Any evening or weekend operating room team will be able to accommodate minimally invasive robotic surgery. Our system is incredibly easy to use for the surgeon. Its human-like motion coupled with virtual reality are quick and easy to learn and to use during any procedure. Operations are technically challenging enough without us having to spend days or weeks learning how to use our tools. And of course, our device is intelligent. It is data-driven and connected so that we can collect procedural data and then give it back to surgeons, creating a system that's assistive to the surgeon for better, safer procedures. So yes, our robot is more than just animation. This is my favorite video of the first robot we developed in 2014. It is a single miniature robotic arm, 12 millimeters in diameter, based on our core technology. And this core technology has allowed us to create our advanced hardware platform that, yes, it's single incision, it's unrestricted, efficient, and easy to use, and has won us the very first breakthrough designation from the FDA for a surgical robotic device. The FDA has awarded this designation to Vicarious Surgical after careful review because they are confident, as we are, that we will have a real and significant impact to patient care. Then on top of our hardware platform, we bring in connectivity and networking, data acquisition that will allow us to employ artificial intelligence techniques like machine learning in order to further augment our platform, creating a breakthrough hardware and software platform that is not only single incision, unrestricted, efficient, and easy to use, but is intelligent as well. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you're interested in visiting Boston and driving the robot, please feel free to contact me. My email, bgreene@vicarioussurgical.com. Thank you again.
Hello, all. Now we're open for question and answers. I think we have some from the online audience. I also think we might have some from our other moderators. Exciting to see that indeed new platforms are forming. I saw some things that I've never seen before, like Vicarious. I really didn't see any presentation before of that. Also the Senhance robot is quite new to me. CMR we've seen before. We had them at our conferences, and I think they've started to penetrate the market. So one of the things that we have question about, of course, is cost. We all know that a robotic platform is quite a significant capital cost for your hospital to acquire. Andrew, do you know what a CMR robot costs actually as a capital investment? Because we have any idea?
Philip, that's always a difficult question to answer because, as you know, a lot of funding around robots is the number of procedure related. Clearly startups, there's also a volume effect. So I think it'd be unfair to make too much comment about the finances because it would be an individual matter. But no, they're, as you know, they're not cheap platforms. One of the issues, obviously, is about reusable instruments. The CMR, like Senhance, does have reusable instruments, but that will also be country specific. We have issues in the UK with prion disease, so mad cow disease in simple terms. So that's one of our worries about reusable instruments. We use them for open surgery, but there is talk that we perhaps should dispose of everything. That's a huge economic and obviously effect on the world. So cost is always a difficult thing and it will reflect local practices.
So we could ask the same question to the Senhance platform, and I don't know whether Vicarious is already clinically active, and if I could say we want to purchase it. Maybe first Mohan, Dr. Mohan.
Thank you. And similar to Dr. Beaux, I think when it comes to the cost thing, it's really region specific. From a capital investment standpoint, we're very competitive with what you'd expect from robotic systems in the market today, but we really like to have the conversation more about total cost of care and not just the capital cost, because when you start to look at total cost of care, there's some significant benefits given that you don't have to invest in a new sterile processing situation, no new sterilizer, no new OR infrastructure, and so that's where you see an amplified cost savings when you look at the total cost of ownership when it comes to something like the Senhance versus traditional robotic surgery.
So, and Dr. Greene, we also have a question probably from a surgeon from the US, when it will be available, somebody asks.
Oh, we have not yet gone through the FDA, so this is not approved. We're still very early in our development and are looking for surgeons to provide feedback, and we haven't built any systems that are ready to go into hospitals yet. So we're certainly in our infancy and have a lot of planning left to do. But our goal is to be very competitive with the other systems that are on the market, both in design and in sterilization techniques, as well as in cost.
We have another online question, and because I've been using intuitive robot, the Da Vinci, of course, many times, where you control your camera using a pedal, and I've always also been having a taste of the CMR robot, not in clinical setting, but and there you do it with your hands, I think. So the question is, indeed, Andrew Beaux, how do you? Of course, you don't have practiced with the Da Vinci robot. How do you think the movement of a camera, is that intuitive, or how you would call it? Is that straightforward?
Yes, it depends where you are in the operation. If you're using the instruments, you can use the camera up and down and left and right with the two toggles on each hand of the hand pieces. So you can operate and move the camera simultaneously. It's like any computer game. It's practice. So you might be driving the racing car, but can you fire guns at the same time, and can you actually point them in the right direction? And it's partly practice. And I was a real robot skeptic, I have to say that, but I have to say that I have changed my mind for lots of reasons. And it was already mentioned today around practicing individual bits. If there's a difficult bit in the operation, you only get to practice it once every time you do that operation. But with a robot, you can go away and practice that one bit. It's a bit like the difficult passage in a piano piece. You practice that over and over again. And that's really where these platforms, in terms of preparing surgeons to actually do an operation and do it safely, I think has made big inroads. I'm impressed.
So, and the Senhance robot, how do you move the camera there?
So in the Senhance system, it tracks your eyes, and there's an activation that you can activate the eye sensor, and it decouples it from your hands so you can continue to work with your hands while steering the camera with your gaze. So where you look, the camera will follow. If you want to zoom in, zoom out, it's just very subtle movements of your head in or out. And that way you can control the camera while also controlling your instruments and doing what you need to do during surgery.
And for the Vicarious, it would be with that impressive goggles?
With Vicarious, there's a virtual reality headset that the surgeon can wear, or the surgeon can sit at an open console. And if you're sitting at an open console and you don't like to use the virtual reality, which some people feel they want to have an open architecture, then you'll be able to use toggles as well. But if you're like I do, I love the virtual reality headset. It's so natural. If you want to see an instrument coming in, or you want to look at your elbow, because we have the elbows inside the abdomen, you just turn your head to the side and the robot turns its head to the side. You want to look up, you look down, anywhere you move your head. It's so simple and it's natural motion. I think that's an amazing advantage, an advancement in robotic surgery.
So thinking as a hernia surgeon, I've been thinking about how you work with this single port. How would you put in your needles in and out with all the suturing that you're going to do? Would you have to remove the whole system, or you need an assist port, or?
I like to use an assist port. I think that makes things much quicker. But if someone wants to go through the trocar, we'll have a separate space to put needles in down the center of the trocar.
Okay.
I have a question. Like I was mentioning before, it's super exciting to see competition finally starting to percolate and enter our field of surgery. Regarding the systems that you are speaking, if I can get a panel answer, it's going to be like the Wild Wild West with all these competitors entering in almost at the same time. If there's one feature about the product you're speaking about that can set itself apart from the rest, what would you say that would be?
Should we just each go on our own?
Yeah, let's start off with Arun.
Sure. And so I would say the one feature, the most exciting part, is really our augmented intelligence capabilities. As I was saying in the talk, the system today, any robotic system, just cannot see. All it's doing is passing a video feed from your camera to you at the console. And if it cannot see, then it cannot learn. If it cannot learn, it cannot get to any of these AI assistants that we all want to be at. And so the first foray is getting into seeing, allowing the system to process what it's seeing. And the FDA has given us clearance for that first foundational elements. And that's very exciting, because from there, now, instead of having just a tool that you manipulate in surgery, you can actually start to expect more from this tool, so it can assist you. It can be maybe a digital assistant of sorts. That's very exciting, because, robotic assistance, manipulation of instruments is exciting, absolutely. And there's more work to be done. There'll always be more work to be done there. But the complement is the augmented intelligence side that brings it together and now really adds both not only the physical, but the cognitive sort of element. So I think AI for us, it's very exciting. And the fact that we've gotten FDA clearance and we're already making steps, progressing forward, only fuels that excitement for us as a company.
Andrew, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, because I don't have a lot of experience with the other platforms. And remember, I'm a simple surgeon, and I'm not at the forefront of the development as some of your other speakers are. But I would have to say that no matter, we live in a world where no matter what one team does, the next team will do shortly afterwards. If you look at the car industry, seatbelts came into one manufacturer, then they all had them, and then they got a radio, and then they all got them, and then they got heads-up display. Now they've all got them as an optional extra. So I think there will always be innovators in every platform, which will also go around local provision, getting approval in every country will also be important, because you might have something fancy in America which I can't use in Europe. So there will be constant change and constant flux through all of this. And what we have today will be very different tomorrow. So I don't think there's any one thing that would separate CMR out from anything else. It's an alternative platform with a lot of energy behind it. And I think the robot market will grow together. It's estimated that the market is 25 billion in 2025. So there's a lot of money riding on this, and that's why there's a lot of investment.
What about you, Barry?
Yeah, Vicarious is really a completely different platform. So the difficulty that I saw with with laparoscopy and with all the multi-port robots is that if you set your ports up good for your operation or perfectly for your operation, it works great. But as soon as you have to, change angles, and it's really important in hernia surgery, because we're going from one side to the other. But let's say you're doing bariatrics and I'm doing a gastrojejunectomy, and then I want to do a gallbladder. Then my ports are wrong for one of the two operations, or a colon, looking at the splenic flexure and taking and doing the colorectal and the colorectal anastomosis. So what Vicarious robot does is it allows for the robot post to move throughout the abdomen. It can go forward, and then it can turn to the right by changing the shoulders, and the head stays directly in the proper orientation. You can look up and then change the orientation so that you're looking up and you're not straining yourself to paint on the ceiling. You're actually looking forward or down or to the left. So accessibility throughout the abdomen is really the differentiator. The natural motion of the head, the ability to utilize all of the AI and overlay through the virtual reality headset is just amazing. So I think that what we have uncovered is a potential in robotic surgery that heretofore has not yet existed. And I think that's the most exciting thing for me.
So as I think we're all excited with the competition and the innovation with new products, training has been brought up by all of you. And so where do we see this going on? Is everyone going to require robust training for every single platform, from the OR staff to the surgeons to the residents? And I think we've all had to work on some reasonable curricula for whatever robotic system that we use. So are we gonna have training fatigue? Maybe we can go around again. We'll start with Arun.
Sure, I think you're spot on. Training, especially, even with new technology today, outside the OR, there's a learning curve for everything. What we're trying to do, and with our surgeon advisory board, is trying to make sure anything we bring in new is not a huge shift from what they already do today. So if they're going from Senhance and then adding to it, or they're going from laparoscopy, which is our kind of addressable market of laparoscopic surgeons, that it's all additive, so they don't have to. So the training is also then, the learning curve is easier to scale versus if we're trying to change them completely and have them relearn everything from scratch. So that's certainly there. And then investing, I think you saw all of us talked about remote assistance, remote proctoring, remote capabilities, something that we've had to hone and develop very quickly in the pandemic, and really like what we've provided, being able to do remote proctoring even across geographies, with getting some of our centers up in Japan running in the face of the pandemic. And we can see that staying to help with training as well, just continued assistance through the case and through several cases as they scale the learning curve.
Andrew, what are your thoughts? Does the MR need to have specific training, or can we build something that incorporates all of the systems?
Well, there's a bit of both thrown in there. I think you and I are old enough to remember the old days where you turned up and no one really asked you what you couldn't do. I know that, but I'm pulling your leg. Where you would turn up and move to a new department, and you would just crack on and do something. You know, I have a private pilot's license, so and I'm very familiar with the fact that I can only fly one specific plane, and if I want to fly a different plane, I have to get type certification. So, you know, we have lagged behind the airline industry in terms of not only learning to fly, but also keeping our skills up and being checked out for the rare events that don't happen that often. So absolutely, I do think that training is going to become more important. There's such a pressure on us as surgeons to just operate to process the large number of patients. And we have to take a stand to make sure that surgery is safe for our patients. And we do have to interact not just with industry, but through the licensing authorities to make sure that this is done properly.
So, Barry, what are your thoughts?
No, I really hear everything that you're saying about the need to enhance our training facilities and our training ability. But I think that with the current computer systems, if you look at the AID in industry, you open up an AID and you it tells you exactly what to do, how to turn it on. So we're designing our system so that anyone can start it up. You don't need to have certification to plug things together, get it running. The artificial intelligence should be able to troubleshoot all the details so that it's really plug and play. And then the system itself should be designed so that when a surgeon sits down and grabs a controller, the controller tells them exactly what each button does, what to do. It gives them guidance. I would like to see these systems be much less dependent upon days of practice in order to get good at them, and go back to what we did when we were open surgeons. So that's really our focus, is to make this so natural that a surgeon sits down, picks up the hand controllers tells them what to do, and then they operate as if they were open. And I think that's really our main goal.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, because I remember as a junior surgeon spending many hours on tying knots and learning to handle a simple open instrument. So it is always interesting coming to surgery at experience level, where you also have the anatomy and the surgical understanding all sorted out, and then taking it back to training when it's not only dealing with the instruments, but it's also dealing with the unfamiliar anatomy. So I'd be very interested to know that whether we can take the next generation, give them the instrument, and it tells them how to do the operation itself. But I do think we have a long way to go for that.
Yes.
I have another question, if you don't mind. And what I see as the biggest challenge of getting competition to market is that the respective companies have to figure out where they're going to target. For example, I think it would be very difficult to be able to target the United States with the amount of intuitive robotic systems in the United States, because it requires not only you finding your experts to be the key opinion leaders of your system, you also have to be able to sell it to other hospitals around that area, and have that expert be on that system, get him or her to the point of proficiency, and then who are they going to train? They're going to have to train other surgeons that have the same system as yours. How are these strategies being developed as far as actually breaking out into the market in a meaningful way? Maybe start off again with Arun.
Sure. I think it's a challenge. I think you're right. And the best way I can say is, we're trying to change this notion that one size needs to fit all. Like, why is it that you have to make a choice between a Da Vinci platform and something else? Today, each platform is designed to do something really well. The Da Vinci platform does really well in taking open surgeries, making it minimally invasive, giving wristed instrument technology, making these complex cases simpler, but it comes at a high cost. So maybe reserve that system for those procedures that can pay the high cost because of the high complexity. But then there are high volume, low reimbursement procedures that may need a different type of more efficient robotic platform. So we've reached the age here where one size doesn't need to fit all. Start to think comprehensively about your robotics programs is what we're trying to tell hospitals, and to pick the right system for the right use and for the right type of surgeon. A laparoscopic surgeon may take very well to one system versus another. Set them up for success so that you don't have to deal with efficiency problems. And so that's the strategy we're going into. And you're right, the laparoscopic, you say general laparoscopic skill set and expertise changes from region to region, from country to country. And by employing something like this, where we start to tell people, just think comprehensively about the robotics program. Robotics can be cost prohibitive if you try and grow a program because it's not sustainable if you apply it to the wrong procedures. So now you have options. You can deploy the right system for the right reasons and the right types of procedures. That's sort of how we're going and having the conversation today, just because otherwise we start to get to this whole Me Too sort of setup where we're just trying to make cheaper and cheaper things versus really solving for the needs and the challenges and the need and the requests of surgeons. And I hope that answered your question, but that's how we're thinking about it today.
Conrad, you're muted, I think.
Barry, strategy, emerging into market in a meaningful and significant way. What's your plan with that?
Well, our strategy is portability. We think that one of the difficulties in all of these systems is that they're extremely heavy, physically heavy, over 1,000 pounds, multiple pieces. And what's really, again, the neat thing about Vicarious is that we really are being developed by surgeons in the highest levels of the development. And we walk in and say, you know, one of the problems with Da Vinci is you can't move it from one place to the other. And you can't afford to use it in a surgery center. And so really, there's an enormous market for us to go into surgery centers and remote hospitals that can't afford the crazy cost of this large technology. So our focus is keeping the cost of the product down, both capital and case costing, keep that down to a reasonable level, make it easy to put into a small center, and then portable between rooms. So you should bring it in just like you say, well, I want the book Walter today, or I want the OmniTrack. I mean, you know, both of those things are not easy to set up for everyone, but they bring it into the room and they set it up. So I think that you know, we've gone through a lot of technology over the years with ultrasounds in the OR, and it really needs to come into the OR and be able to be just moved in, turned on, put in by the surgeon, and then go. So that's our strategy, is make it easy and make it affordable.
So Andrew, let me ask you in a little bit different of a way, because this is you coming from a little bit different of a perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume CMR is targeting Europe and potentially specifically the UK. So what they've done is they've identified a target region, then they've identified a key opinion leader such as yourself. So in order for you to be able to train other surgeons, that would require not you only developing proficiency doing a relatively high volume of cases, but more importantly, it also depends on other hospital systems getting the CMR robot so you can translate your skill set and knowledge of that system to others. Do you have a game plan of how they're going to do that?
Yeah, like all these startup companies, they have I'm sure they have a game plan. Why they came to me and others, I can't really say. But there's two aspects to it. And I think one is awareness of the system, and one is awareness of the operation. And currently where I'm at, because of my operative skills on the system, I'm more aware of the system rather than the operation. I know how to do the operation, but if the operation goes wrong in a different center, it's not my position to take over the operation and bail them out. But with any new technology, whether it's flying a new plane or a new car and fiddling with the toys, there's only so much that the brain can process. And very quickly, you can get overwhelmed by the situation and start to become dangerous. And I see my key role as I proctor both physically and from a distance is trying to have that 3D vision to actually say, stop, something's not right here before hopefully something happens. So there is an element of trying to make it safe. And any startup company in CMR would have this very much at the top of their game, is to make sure it's safe. But you know what surgery's like and you know what surgeons are like. And while they've trained me to do a particular job, we have so many other pressures on us, and suddenly being asked in 2 weeks' time, can I go somewhere? Well, I can't because I have my clinic or operating list set up. So this new startup is always very difficult. But the bottom line is you need money. And I often think, we've got lots of cars out there, but Tesla has broken into the market. But has it made any money yet? Not really. It's still massively in debt. And that makes it hard for any startup. There's a lot of money involved. And again, why do you buy a car? There's lots of different cars out there, but you will buy a particular one. How it fits into your situation. Does it actually fit in the drive? Does it get through your gate? Can you actually store it in your OR rooms? Where does the money come from? Is it innovation money that you have, or is it capital money that you have? So there are lots of different ways that companies can not necessarily exploit, but allow them to get safely into a market. But safety is obviously very important.
So I have one more question from the audience, from Hakan Huck. Because one of the things where the new CMR Senhance differ is the size of the trocars. So working with 5mm trocars. The surgeon, Conrad, Archana, Andrew, are we all surgeons? Arun, are you a surgeon as well? No.
No.
Do we think it matters whether to have an 8mm trocar taken down to 5mm trocar, except for the scar being a little bit less? Because otherwise I think Intuitive would have made 5mm instruments already if it was so easy. Conrad, you kick off.
I'm sorry, my internet cut off there, but I believe I heard you regarding the instrumentation.
The size of the trocars, does it matter is it very important for you to be able to size it down from 8 to 5mm?
No, that's not super important to me. I think that would be of benefit. Is that the first thing that I would be looking for in a new system? Probably not. But that's a difficult challenge. I know Intuitive has smaller instrumentation, but it was a very limited instrument profile as far as what they can offer. I do think everything is getting smaller, though. The footprint, like Barry was referring to, is getting smaller, these systems. And it is exciting to see. And perhaps, the less invasive you get, the better outcomes that would translate into. What are your thoughts, Arch?
Oh, I like you, I'd used some of those 5mm instruments when they were available from Intuitive. I'm not even sure if they're all available anymore. I didn't really see, they weren't as good as the 8mm ones, and I didn't see a huge benefit, so just kind of stepped away from that and stayed with the other ones. I think that one thing that would potentially affect it is if we were seeing a lot of hernias from these 8mm port sites, which I don't think that we are, since we definitely have a much longer experience with 5mm ports and knowing that it's extremely, extremely rare to see a hernia from that.
Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there has been a vogue to go smaller. Were Intuitive slow at making them smaller, maybe because they didn't have any competition? There's no doubt that safety, the bigger the instrument, the more robust it is. And bits falling off and getting lost in the patient will obviously be a disaster. There's the law of the lever as the wires that manipulate the instruments, as they get smaller, they're more likely to break, and the grasping strength goes down. So there's a lot of benefit, I would have thought, for a larger instrument. Patients, it seems to matter to them. They do like to know, how long's my scar going to be, doc? And I guess, like all these things, it becomes a USP for a particular surgeon who might say, I'm a laparoscopic surgeon that only does small ports. So there's lots of different reasons why small ports can be of benefit. But I agree, I'm not sure in terms of whether you've got a 1 centimeter scar or a 7 millimeter scar, it makes that much difference. It wouldn't to my body, but I'm not bothered.
Finally, Barry, any thoughts on that as a surgeon?
Yes, definitely. In the mid '90s, Storz came out with a set of 3 millimeter instruments, and I did a lot of microlaparoscopy for patients that wanted small scars. And then we worked on the single port system to try and minimize scarring. And I think that's all really very nice for the patients. And I do see a concern going from a 5, in terms of scarring, going from a 5 to an 8. But you're right, we've had no troubles with the 8 millimeter ports. We've had rare troubles even with the 12 millimeter ports. And so I think that some surgeons might have hesitation when Vicarious comes out with a 15 millimeter port. But I think that the advantage of being able to close that will be fine, and putting that port in a cosmetically advantageous position will also help, and then being able to push the robot in and go from the suprapubic area all the way up to the diaphragm will help minimize the concern of having a larger incision. But I think your point about the stiffness of the instruments is very important. I can do a lap chole with all 3 millimeter instruments. I can put a lap band in with 3 millimeter instruments. But when you go to take the gallbladder out, you need to have a larger incision, and you put the band in, you need a larger incision. So you need one larger incision, and that's why we decided to go with this single larger incision. So the difficulty between the compromise engineering of stiffness and having the ability to truly do dissection and throwing needles in the angles that you want, I think that when surgeons start to use them, you'll be able to do certain operations with smaller incisions, smaller trocars, but you won't be able to do all of the surgery. It's going to be really hard to do a large hysterectomy with fibroids and lift that up with less than a 5. Certainly, it's going to be even hard with a 5. So I think there's the limitations of the technology, and I do applaud all the work that Senhance has done with ceramics in putting that into the wall of their instruments to increase that stiffness, but there still are limitations that the engineers will tell us.
Okay, thank you for that final word. I think we'll wrap up this session. Do hang on maybe a few minutes, because I will, before the end of this session and to go to break, present the clinical cases that we are doing live tomorrow. As you know, COVID-wise, we are not able to operate live, obviously. So I did prepare a few virtual live cases, which has some advantages in that you can time it, cut out pieces that don't. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Philip, and I'm moving to the presenter there. So, can you put up the slides of the clinical cases? So tomorrow, Friday, we have, and the timing you can find it on the website. It's obviously a bit confusing because people will be joining from all over the world, different time zones. But you can click on the add calendar, and then it will automatically put it in your agenda with your local timing. First case we're going to do tomorrow starts at 8:15 sharp tomorrow morning. Our time will be a robotic single dock suprapubic E-tap access approach. So it's a female patient with no comorbidities. She has a mild overweight, but BMI that is making a lot of US surgeons jealous probably. In 2016, she had a laparoscopic sigmoidectomy, which was complicated by leakage, for which she had a laparotomy. And a year after, she started having a swelling of her scar that gradually increased and giving her more and more symptoms. This is the CT scan of this patient, where you see the upper abdomen is close to the xiphoid is okay. Lower down you see herniation of the colon, and below the umbilicus also the linea alba seems fine. Here you see the sagittal view with herniation of predominantly transverse colon probably. So this takes me to, and we've presented this also last year during our live cases, what is on the social media become known as the Carbonell equation. What does it mean? It means that you try from a preoperative CT scan, try to find out, will I be able to repair this hernia staying inside the confines of the rectus sheet, or will I have to go outside doing some form of component separation? So the rule actually says that you measure the maximum width of the defect, and at that same level on the CT scan you also measure the width of the rectus muscle on the left and the right side, and the equation adds up. If it's below 2, then the probability that you will need some form of component separation to close the defect and perform the repair is high. Of course, this is not that far from 2, so this is a bit in the gray zone probably. Another aspect of this patient is that she has her hernia mainly in the periumbilical and supraumbilical area, leaving the lower abdomen free. She also has no history of lower abdominal incisions, no cesarean section, which is in my opinion, one of the ideal cases to do such a suprapubic single dock approach. So this is actually the patient. Very important to position the patient very well, like we also know from the laparoscopic or the robotic E-tap surgery presentations, to have a flex of the bed at that level. So we have taken a lot of videos, a camera that's in the roof of the operating room, obviously the robotic camera, and also you will see a laparoscopic camera, which with a lot of work we combined in one virtual live case. The next case that will start at 11 will be a robot TAR with double docking, which is more like the traditional way to do a robotic TAR. Male patient, 76 years. He had a splenectomy in the 70s for congenital thrombocytopenia. So before the surgery, we had to give some thrombocytes infusion. Has some cardiac history and also had a prostatectomy for adenocarcinoma. BMI a bit higher than the previous patient, but still below 30. Surgical history, quite extensive: splenectomy, appendectomy, cholecystectomy, also the abdominoplasty has been performed, and patient also had a prostatectomy, which is important because then of course you will have a scar in the retropubic, in the infraumbilical area. he had in 2018 a laparotomy for a cystic lesion of the small bowel, which eventually on this scar he developed a wide incisional hernia. And he was actually seen in our department in March with an incarcerated groin hernia. At that time we decided not to treat incisional hernia, but because it's becoming more and more symptomatic, patient came for a repair of his incisional hernia. So this is the CT scan, a bit similar to the previous patient, less herniation of small bowel, but you see white diastasis actually in the periumbilical region. If we put this into numbers with the Carbonell equation, once again, not massively wide, not a lot below 2, but still following this rule, probably need for some form of component separation to close that sufficiently. Also here, no involvement of M4, M5. Obviously, this patient is not a good candidate for a supraarteriotic docking because of the expected scarring in the lower abdomen. So I've been editing these cases. It's quite time-consuming trying to find the right sections to put, and when also, of course, this is an operation that lasted about 3.5 hours, and we've cut it down to about 1.5 to be able to present that to you tomorrow. The third case, starting in the afternoon for us, will be robotic repair of a type 4 hiatal hernia. This is a 53-year-old male patient, no comorbidities, BMI similar, 26.8. He has a diagnosis since 2002, since it's a significant time, of a diaphragmatic hernia, which is becoming more and more symptomatic, leading to even anemia, and also more recently to dyspnea, probably because of the extent of stomach that is inside the thorax. So this is a CT scan of his thorax and upper abdomen. You see a large part of the stomach is inside of the thorax, and you actually can see that the pylorus is at the level of the hiatus. Still, some of the part of the stomach is inside the abdomen, but the pylorus itself is almost located at the... So this is the positioning. We will discuss tomorrow, of course, as well. Beach chair position that we handle, and trocar positions. We use 4 trocars, 1 liver retractor, and an assist port. So, but that we'll be showing tomorrow, obviously. I have to thank my wife, because this has been time-consuming, and I've been sitting behind my computer most of the last days. She's still happy. I have to thank the dog, because I didn't have time for him as well. He's less happy. He's sleeping all the time anyway. So, but he's missing me. He comes with the ball to me because we like to play football. But anyway, so I hope you enjoy tomorrow. Looking forward that you will also join the sessions tomorrow. As you know, 8:15 sharp, we're going to start. Now we're having a break, and I hope to see you back at 4 o'clock Brussels time. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.